In the quiet streets of 19th century Kyoto, a young craftsman named Fusajiro Yamauchi sat under the glow of a paper lantern, hand-painting tiny blossoms onto a deck of playing cards. He had no idea that those humble cards, meant simply to bring people joy, would one day spark a revolution in global entertainment. From a single workshop, his company would evolve into Nintendo, the force behind Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon. This is the story of how one man's brushstrokes of tradition became the building blocks of a billion-dollar empire, and how innovation turned play into history. The man who started it all. Kyoto, 1865. Japan was on the brink of transformation. The shoguns were fading into memory, railways were replacing rickshaws, and the scent of change filled the narrow streets. Amid this swirl of progress, a young craftsman named Fusajiro Yamauchi grew up with ink-stained hands and a restless mind. He wasn't born into wealth or privilege, just curiosity and an eye for beauty. Fusajiro had always been fascinated by patterns and symbolism. In an era when most men followed family trades, he spent his evenings sketching cherry blossoms, cranes, and moonlit pines. That creative instinct would soon collide with a moment of opportunity. In 1889, the Japanese government lifted a long-standing ban on card games, opening a new frontier for entertainment. Where others saw a passing fad, Fusajiro saw a market and a canvas. Using fine brushes and natural pigments, he began painting intricate Hanafuda cards, a traditional Japanese game filled with flowers and poetry. Each card was a tiny work of art that carried a hint of storytelling in its design. Neighbors soon noticed. His creations stood apart, not just for their beauty, but for their feel, their spirit. He named his small workshop Nintendo Kopai, which loosely translates to leave luck to heaven. It wasn't just a name, it was a philosophy. Fusajiro believed in doing the work, then surrendering the rest to fate. Within months, his handmade cards became a sensation across Kyoto. Families used them during New Year celebrations, gamblers played them in smoky backrooms, and shopkeepers displayed them proudly at their counters. In a country still balancing old traditions and new industries, Fusajiro found a bridge between the two. His artistry wasn't just about cards, it was about connection, joy, and the timeless magic of play. What began as a side craft in a wooden workshop had quietly planted the seed for a global phenomenon. The birth of Nintendo. The success of Hanafuda cards spread quickly. Soon, Fusajiro's small workshop could barely keep up with demand. Orders poured in from nearby towns, and merchants began carrying his cards throughout Japan. Realizing that his business was no longer a one-man operation, he expanded. Fusajiro hired apprentices to help paint, package, and distribute. What had started as a modest craft now had a name recognized across Kyoto, Nintendo Kopai. But Fusajiro was more than an artist. He was a businessman who understood people. He didn't just sell cards, he sold experiences. His cards were durable, beautifully designed, and affordable. In an age when leisure was becoming part of modern life, Nintendo gave Japan something it didn't know it needed: a way to play. As the 20th century dawned, the nation's appetite for entertainment grew. Families gathered around small tables to play Hanafuda after dinner, and Nintendo became a household name synonymous with quality. The company even began experimenting with Western-style playing cards, expanding its reach beyond Japan's borders. By 1907, Nintendo had become the largest producer of playing cards in the country, a quiet empire built on art, discipline, and risk-taking. Fusajiro's leadership style was simple but visionary, combined craftsmanship with curiosity. He often said that a good product feels alive in the hands, and insisted on inspecting each batch before shipment. That personal touch earned Nintendo a reputation that larger manufacturers couldn't match. But time, as always, kept moving. By the late 1920s, Fusajiro was growing older and ready to pass the torch. Tradition dictated that the business should stay within the family, but he had no sons. Instead, he turned to his capable son-in-law, Sekirio Kaneda, who would take on the Yamauchi name to continue the legacy. Under Sekirio's careful stewardship, Nintendo remained stable and respected. The company still made its beloved Hanafuda cards, but the world around them was changing fast. Radio, film, and Western influence were transforming Japan's cultural landscape. Fusajiro had started with brushes and ink. Now, the foundation he laid was strong enough to weather the coming storm of modernity. He couldn't have known it then, but the company bearing his name was only at the start of its incredible evolution, from paper cards to pixels, and from small-town Kyoto to the global stage. The next generation. When Fusajiro's grandson, Hiroshi Yamauchi, took over the family business in 1949, Japan was still rebuilding from the ashes of World War II. Amid all that, a 22-year-old college dropout walked into the Nintendo offices and declared himself president. The employees were stunned. Many had been with Nintendo since before the war, and didn't take kindly to being led by someone barely old enough to rent a car. But Hiroshi had inherited his grandfather's sharp instincts and a will of iron. When some staff rebelled against his leadership, he didn't hesitate. He fired them all. "There can only be one captain on this ship," he reportedly said. It was a ruthless move, but one that set the tone for the company's next era. Hiroshi modernized everything, from production to branding and ambition. By 1953, Nintendo became the first company in Japan to mass-produce plastic playing cards, a breakthrough that transformed the business overnight. The cards were cheaper, more durable, and easier to distribute. That success gave Nintendo a new edge and a new confidence. 6 years later, in 1959, Hiroshi struck a deal that would change Nintendo's destiny, a licensing partnership with Disney. For the first time, beloved characters like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck appeared on Japanese playing cards. The move was genius. It gave Nintendo access to a young, family-friendly market, and sales exploded to over 600,000 decks sold in a single year. It was a national record. Flush with success, Hiroshi renamed the company Nintendo Company Limited and took it public. Yet even as profits soared, he remained restless. A trip to the United States would provide a pivotal wake-up call. During a visit to the American Playing Card Company, the biggest in the world, he was shocked by its small offices and modest operations. If the industry leader looked that unremarkable, he thought, perhaps there was a ceiling to how far Nintendo could go with cards alone. Returning to Kyoto, Hiroshi knew it was time to gamble again. Nintendo couldn't stay a card company forever. It had to evolve or fade. What followed was one of the most daring reinventions in corporate history, born not out of desperation, but out of sheer curiosity. The young man who once fired his elders was now about to fire up Japan's imagination. Nintendo's wild experiments. Flush with success, but aware of the limits of the playing card business, Hiroshi Yamauchi began experimenting. Boldly, recklessly, and sometimes disastrously. He was determined to find Nintendo's next big thing, even if it meant stumbling along the way. In the 1960s, the company launched a series of ventures that, at first glance, seemed completely unrelated to entertainment. There was Nintendo Taxi, a fleet of bright cars that promised convenient rides through Kyoto's growing city streets. There was a chain of love hotels, a short-lived experiment in private getaways. And then came Instant Rice, inspired by Japan's booming convenience food market. All three failed spectacularly. By the late 60s, Nintendo was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. But in those failures lay the company's first true superpower, the courage to keep trying. One day, during a walk through one of Nintendo's factories, Hiroshi noticed an engineer named Gunpei Yokoi idly tinkering with a homemade gadget. It was a simple, extendable toy arm he'd built to pass the time. Most bosses might have ignored it. Hiroshi saw potential. "Put it into production," he said. The result was the Ultra Hand, released in 1966, a silly, stretchy contraption that could grab objects across a room. It became a runaway hit, selling more than 1.2 million units in Japan alone. Almost overnight, Nintendo transformed from a failing card manufacturer into a promising toy company. Hiroshi immediately promoted Yokoi and created a small research and development division. "Keep experimenting," he told him. "That's how we'll survive." Nintendo's new toys, the Love Tester, Ultra Machine, and Ultra Scope, captured the playful spirit of the era. They weren't just products, they were experiences. For the first time, the company wasn't selling cards or tools, it was selling imagination. By the end of the 1970s, Hiroshi's gamble had paid off. Nintendo's name was once again known across Japan. But now for something far more exciting than Hanafuda. Yokoi's creativity and Hiroshi's risk-taking had built a culture of innovation that refused to stay in one lane. What no one could have predicted was that the same factory that once produced hand-painted cards and plastic toys was standing at the edge of a digital revolution, and that it would be one that would change the world of play forever. The dawn of video games. By the late 1970s, the world was buzzing with a new kind of entertainment. Video games. Arcades were popping up in every major city, flashing with lights and digital sounds that drew crowds of curious players. Hiroshi Yamauchi, always one to sense a shift before others did, realized that this was where the future of play was headed. Nintendo's first experiments were humble. They released a home console called the Color TV Game 6 in 1977. It was a simple system that let families play different versions of Pong. It sold well enough to keep the lights on, but it was hardly revolutionary. Their follow-up, the Color TV Game 15, offered more games and a sleeker design, yet profits remained thin. The big break hadn't come, at least not yet. Meanwhile, over in America, Nintendo tried its hand at arcade machines. One of them, Radarscope, looked promising in Japan but tanked overseas, leaving the company with thousands of unsold cabinets collecting dust in a Seattle warehouse. It could have been another disaster in a long line of experiments, until a young designer stepped up. That designer was Shigeru Miyamoto, a fresh-faced artist with a background in industrial design and a mind bursting with imagination. Tasked with salvaging the leftover machines, Miyamoto created something new, a story-driven arcade game about a carpenter trying to rescue his girlfriend from a barrel-throwing ape. He called it Donkey Kong. It was an instant global phenomenon. The game introduced a heroic little man named Jumpman, who would later be renamed Mario, after Nintendo of America's landlord, Mario Segale. With Donkey Kong, Nintendo found not just a hit, but an identity. From that moment on, video games became its destiny. The company poured its energy into creating both hardware and software, guided by a simple philosophy: fun comes first. In 1983, Nintendo launched the Family Computer, or Famicom, known internationally as the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES. Paired with Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda, it redefined what home gaming could be. The NES revived an industry still reeling from the 1983 video game crash, proving that innovation and quality could restore public trust. Hiroshi's risk-taking and Miyamoto's creativity had collided in perfect harmony. Nintendo was no longer a Japanese toy maker. It was the heartbeat of a global gaming revolution. The boy who once painted cards in Kyoto had, through his descendants, just changed the world of play forever. The Golden Age, from NES to Game Boy to Wii. As the 1980s gave way to the 90s, Nintendo stood at the peak of the gaming world. The Nintendo Entertainment System had become a household staple across the globe, and the company's name was now synonymous with fun, family, and innovation. But Hiroshi Yamauchi wasn't content to sit still. He wanted to make Nintendo not just a company that made games, but one that defined them. In 1989, under the leadership of engineer Gunpei Yokoi, Nintendo released the Game Boy. It was a chunky gray handheld console with greenish graphics and a tinny little speaker that somehow enchanted the world. Bundled with the addictive puzzle game Tetris, it sold millions and made gaming portable for the first time. Suddenly, long train rides and waiting rooms became playgrounds. The 1990s were an era of expansion and experimentation. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System dazzled players with richer worlds and soundtracks that felt orchestral. Games like Super Mario World, Donkey Kong Country, and The Legend of Zelda. A Link to the Past pushed creative boundaries and solidified Nintendo's reputation as the heart of gaming imagination. Then came Pokémon, a phenomenon that captured imaginations worldwide. In 1996, Nintendo, alongside Game Freak and Creatures, launched Pokémon Red and Green in Japan, introducing players to a world of collectible creatures, epic battles, and the now iconic slogan, "Gotta catch 'em all." The franchise quickly became more than a game. Trading cards, an animated TV series, movies, and merchandise created a global obsession. Pokémon turned Game Boy screens into portals for adventure, strategy, and social connection, as kids and adults alike competed to catch rare creatures and trade with friends. When 3D gaming arrived, Nintendo again led the charge with the Nintendo 64, bringing players iconic titles like Super Mario 64 and The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, both of which redefined what video games could achieve. Even the competition with Sega and Sony only sharpened Nintendo's vision to make innovation accessible to everyone. In the 2000s, while rivals focused on raw power and realism, Nintendo did the unexpected again. The Wii, launched in 2006, wasn't about graphics. It was about movement. Its motion-sensing controller made grandparents, children, and even fitness enthusiasts pick up a remote and play together. It became a cultural phenomenon, selling over 100 million units and proving that play could transcend generations. And through it all, Nintendo's charm remained intact. Its games weren't built on violence or spectacle, but on joy, curiosity, and storytelling. Whether it was a plumber saving a princess or a boy exploring a mystical land, the company never lost sight of what mattered most: making people smile. A century after Fusajiro painted his first card, Nintendo was now painting memories across the world. Nintendo today, a billion-dollar legacy. Today, more than 130 years after Fusajiro Yamauchi first dipped his brush into paint, Nintendo stands as one of the most beloved and profitable entertainment companies on Earth. Its latest console, the Nintendo Switch, launched in 2017, blurred the line between home and handheld gaming, allowing players to start a game on their TV and continue it on the go. That simple yet revolutionary idea reignited global enthusiasm for the brand, leading to more than 140 million units sold and cementing Nintendo as a creative powerhouse once again. The company's financial success mirrors its cultural reach. In 2024 alone, Nintendo reported revenues exceeding $13.9 billion and profits of over $3 billion. It's a staggering figure for a company whose mascot is still a cheerful plumber in overalls. But behind the numbers lies something deeper, a trust built through generations of consistent innovation and storytelling. Nintendo's modern portfolio stretches far beyond consoles. The company has expanded into mobile games, theme parks like Super Nintendo World in Japan and the US, and even a new film division, Nintendo Pictures, responsible for the record-breaking Super Mario Bros. Movie. Across every platform, the message remains the same: play is powerful. From Kyoto's narrow streets to boardrooms in New York and Tokyo, Nintendo continues to blend art, technology, and heart. It's not just a gaming company anymore. It's a storyteller, a memory maker, and a living symbol of how creativity, when guided by courage, can transcend generations. Fusajiro couldn't have imagined that his handmade cards would one day inspire millions around the world to laugh, compete, and connect through play. Yet his vision endures in every console, every character, and every smile. For Nintendo, the game is far from over. It's still only evolving, one joyful creation at a time. What's the first Nintendo game or console that made you fall in love with gaming? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear. For now, we're done. Catch you next time.